Welcome to KBI's Play Your Song Academy. Today we'll be talking about how to take care of your violin and viola. What we'll be learning about is the parts of our instruments, what not to do, setting up to play, posture, how to keep our instruments safe, and all the really cool accessories that you can get for your instrument. Today we have a special guest here to teach us about our instrument. His name is Luke Gray. Luke is a KBI lesson instructor. He teaches and plays many instruments, including the violin and the bass. He's also an instructor at FAME, the Fredericksburg Area Young Musicians Homeschool Group. He also plays in many different genres of music and groups in the Fredericksburg area and beyond.
Hello there, my name is Luke. I am a string teacher here at KBI. Today we're going to go over many things related to the violin and the viola. We're going to start with the parts because we're going to mention a couple of the parts as we set up and learn to play it a little bit. So we're going to start here at the top of the violin. We call this little spirally part here at the top the scroll. It's more of a visual than anything else. It's one of the more iconic things about the violin viola. We don't really actively do anything with this when we're playing. As we go down from the scroll, we encounter these 4 black parts that are called pegs, and the pegs go into the peg box. And what the peg box and pegs allow us to do is hold on to the strings. It's what helps us tune the strings or replace strings if things get really out of whack, if things get really out of tune. So we would simply turn these and then all of a sudden the string would get a whole lot tighter. As we go down from there, we have the neck, which is the lighter portion here, and we have the fingerboard, which extends past the neck all the way down here. The fingerboard is where we put the fingers, of course, and the neck is where our hand is going to be situated when we're using our fingers. When we go below the fingerboard, we have the bridge. It's named that because it kind of looks like a bridge, but the bridge is also important because it's what helps keep the strings up. It provides that tension point where we can actually get the strings to make a noise. On the other end, we have the nut, which is also another tension point in between our 2 secure points. Without the nut, without the bridge, we wouldn't be able to have the strings make any noise. Beside the bridge, we got the 2 F holes. They look like cursive letter Fs. These are important because as we play, that's where most of the sound is going to project. If we didn't have those F holes, it would sound very, very muffled while we played. As we go down here, we have this long black pointy bit that's called the tailpiece because it's at the bottom of the instrument. The tailpiece is important because it's what holds the strings on this side, and we have these nice little fine tuners down here that we can twist little by little, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, to make very, very small adjustments to our instrument if we're only just a little bit out of tune. And then adjacent to the tailpiece, we have the chin rest, which, as you can imagine, is basically where we're going to be putting our head. Even though it's called a chin rest, it's more like a jaw rest, but we call it the chin rest anyway. And those parts are the same on the viola as well. So let's go ahead and go to the next part. So we've talked about the parts of the actual instrument. Now let's talk about the parts of the bow. Thankfully, not nearly as many to remember. So we're going to start here at the bottom part of the bow. Collectively, we like to call the bottom part of this bow the frog. And the parts of the frog are the screw, this little bit at the bottom. This is literally a screw that we righty-tighty or lefty-loosey. And what it does is it makes it so that the hairs of the bow get further away from the stick or closer to the stick, literally tighter or looser. Now we go to this part of the bow, this silver part, we call this the ferrule. The ferrule is important because it's what holds all the hairs in place. They all go in there, stay bunched up so they don't explode and go all over the place. And then above the ferrule, above the frog, we have the grip, this black little part right here. We call it the grip because that's basically where our first finger is going to go when we hold it, and it helps keep it a little bit more situated. If our hands get sweaty or messier like that, it gives it a little bit more solid foundation. Above the grip, we have the winding. The winding is one part visual, but it also adds a little bit of extra weight down here. The bow is weighted in a very specific way so that we can do some more advanced bowing techniques later on. And then of course we just have the long stick, and then we have the hairs of the bow that go all the way up to the tip. There's not very many parts of the tip, but one thing to remember, the tip is very, very fragile. It's very, very temperamental, so we don't really want to be doing anything up here at the tip. All the stuff we're going to be doing is down here at the frog, and those are the parts of the bow. So we've learned about the parts of the instrument. Now we're going to learn about a very important topic, things you should never ever do with your instrument. First and foremost, don't leave your instrument on the ground. It's very, very easy for someone to accidentally step on it or kick it or something. It's not even necessarily you. It could be a pet by accident. If we leave the instrument on the ground, we risk negative things to happen. So instead, when we're not using our instrument, leave it in the case. It's the safest place for the instrument to be, either in the case or in your arms. Next thing you want to be very careful about with your instrument, don't mess with the pegs. The pegs can actually snap a string if we're not careful. What the peg does is it literally tightens the string, and if we twist it too much, we make it too tight, the string can snap, and if it snaps, it could accidentally hit you in the face, or it can hit you in the hand, arm, something like that. It's going to hurt. So if you need to adjust your pegs, definitely take it to your teacher or your music shop or luthier or something, and they can fix you up right away. Next thing you want to do, try to keep your instrument from getting wet. If you are in the rain or something, keep it in its case, keep it underneath an umbrella so it doesn't, seep in through the case and get in there. If you're cleaning around the house or, taking a bath or a shower or something like that, definitely keep the instrument in a different room. If it gets wet by some chance, like you're drinking water and accidentally spills on top of it, definitely want to dry it off as fast as you can. We don't want any negative things to happen because this is pretty thin wood. We don't want things to, get moldy or soft or anything like that. And then lastly, we want to make sure we never leave the instrument in the car. If we leave the instrument in the car, things can get too hot, things can get too cold depending on the season, and that can cause the instrument to crack, or that can cause the glues that are holding the instrument to start to melt, and then you'll have, a pretty big problem after that. So if you need to leave your instrument in the car, it's much better just to take it in wherever you're going. If it's a restaurant, put it underneath your seat. If it's a grocery store or something like that, just put it in the shopping cart. Don't want to risk negative things happening to the instrument by just leaving it in the car for a long time. So, we've talked about things you never do with your instrument. Now let's talk about things we should never do with our bow. The bow is even more fragile, it's even skinnier, so a lot of negative things can happen to the bow if we're too careless. So the first thing you want to make sure you're doing with your bow, you always want to make sure you're holding your bow by the frog or you're holding it by the stick. If you start to hold it by the tip, it can get very unwieldy, it can get very lopsided, it's very easy to accidentally drop it or bang it into something, and something negative can occur if that happens. So never hold the bow by the tip. The hairs of the instrument are very, very grippy. They like to grab onto things. So we don't want to be touching the hairs of the bow with our hand, because we might accidentally transfer dirt or dust or even skin cells that we can't see on top of the bow, and then the hairs will get all muddy, and it'll be much tougher for the hairs to grip the bow because there's a lot of negative particles in there as well. So we don't want to be touching the hairs of the bow if we can help it. Always be touching by the frog or by the stick instead. Now, the most fragile part of the bow is the tip. So we definitely don't want to be leaning on the ground with the bow. We don't want to be, poking, our music stand. We don't want to be poking the walls. We don't want to be poking our friends. So we definitely don't want to be leaning our tip of the bow against anything. Mostly the ground because there's a lot of weight, a lot of gravity, but definitely don't be poking anything else as well. And then lastly, this is a musical instrument, this is a tool, this is not a weapon, so we definitely don't want to be getting into any fights, any sword fights or anything like that. We don't want to be whacking anything, we don't want to be stabbing anything. If we're using our bow properly, it should be making beautiful music and not anything painful. Good. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our instrument like we're about to play. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our instrument and we are going to put our shoulder rest on the instrument. This is going to be important because it's very easy for the instrument to go sliding around on our shoulder, or we have to kind of contort our body to make sure that the instrument stays on our shoulder. So what I like to do is I like to literally put the instrument in between my legs upside down, kind of wedge the strings in between my legs, so that the scroll is facing away from me. And then what I do is I take both legs of the shoulder rest and I slide them from back to front, kind of like you'd slide on a sock. And if you put it on properly, both legs should be at the wide points of your instrument. If it doesn't quite get there, your legs might be a little bit too small. If it goes too far, your legs might be a little bit too wide. But they should be right about the wide points of the instrument. And if you put it on properly, it should kind of look like it's frowning at you. Or you can think of it this way. The lower dip, or the dip that's closer to the instrument, should be on the same side as your chin rest. So once that's on, now we can move on to the bow. First thing we do with the bow is we tighten the hairs. If the hairs are too loose, all of a sudden the hairs are going to be kind of wobbling all over the place. They're not going to be able to grip the strings properly. So we're going to righty-tighty the strings with our screw here, and you're looking for the hairs in the stick to be about a pencil length apart, right down the middle. It's important that we don't tighten it too much because then there can be a lot of tension with the hairs and a lot of tension with the stick, and that can cause negative effects later on. So about a pencil length is what we're looking for. Some people like it a little bit looser, some people like it a little bit tighter. But that's kind of what we're looking for, right about that level. Next thing we have to do is we got to rosin our bow. As violin and viola players, we tend to stick with light rosin. Here's what the rosin is going to kind of look like. This is a brand new stick of rosin right here. What you got to do is you have to push down really hard because you want a lot of friction. And friction is going to create heat. You want to kind of melt the rosin on top of the hairs of the bow. So you got to push down and you got to kind of just work the rosin into your bow like this. If you have a brand new bow, you might need to do this like 100 times or something close to that before the bow can make a good sound on your instrument. If you have a bow that's already been rosined and you don't really need a whole lot on it, you probably don't want to do it this way. If you just want to get a little bit of rosin on your bow, you can do it this way. Nice long strokes to give a nice even coating of rosin from the frog to the tip. The important thing, notice I'm kind of holding the bow like this. You don't have to do this, but I like to just add a bit of weight because, as I said, I want some friction. I want a little bit of heat. So I'm really pushing down. Since this is a new stick of rosin, sometimes it's hard to apply it. If you need a little bit of extra dust from your rosin, you can take some sandpaper, scrape it up a little bit. That'll help a little with a little bit of gripping, but you don't have to do that as long as you're using a lot of weight, a lot of friction. So I've put on enough rosin for today, and now I am ready to play. But wait a second, my instrument, is it in tune or is it not in tune? Now I'm in tune because I tuned before the video, but you might go to your instrument and then hear a bunch of weird sounds that don't quite sound right. Well, What you're going to need to do is get yourself some kind of tuner, whether it's a clip-on tuner, whether it's a device you buy, or whether it's on your phone, and you want to double check. Because we have 4 strings we need to remember. We have the G string, the D string, the A string, and the E string. G, D, A, E. It's very important that you memorize this because when you're tuning up your instrument, those are the pitches, those are the notes that you're looking for. If you are just a little bit out, like you play into the tuner and it's just a little bit low or a little bit high, that's when we twist these fine tuners a little bit, and anybody can do that. You're really no danger for twisting these too much. If you twist it too much, it might accidentally come out, but it's just literally a screw. You can put it back in, you should be good. If the instrument isn't even close to being in tune, if it's like the string is flopping all over the place, then you will have to use the pegs to fix that. And as I mentioned earlier, unless you absolutely know what you're doing with your pegs, you don't want to be twisting this. So take it to your teacher, take it to a music shop, and they'll be able to fix it right up for you. As a side note, the viola has different strings than the violin. They're almost the same, but they have one key difference. The viola strings are C, G, D, A. So the viola goes a little bit lower because it's got a C string underneath the G, but it can't go as high because it doesn't have the E string. So that's C, G, D, A. So now we got our bow tightened, we got our instrument tuned up, we got our bow rosined. Now we got to figure out how to play. So welcome to the lesson room. Now we're going to show you how to position and properly hold your violin or viola. We're going to start with the bow because that actually tends to be the more confusing of the two. Now here are a couple steps you can follow along with. If your teacher tells you something different, definitely go along with what they're telling you, but here are some things you can try at home. I like to use the dot of my bow as a guideline for where all of my fingers are going to fall. So what I do is I take my middle finger and my ring finger and I just kind of grab on top of the stick like that so that my ring finger is covering the dot. Don't let your fingers go too low. Don't let them kind of wave up here on top of the actual stick. They want to be covering the dot. Once you have those fingers there, kind of gripping with the first knuckle, you can just let your first finger, let your pinky fall down. The first finger will fall down and wrap around the stick a little bit, and the pinky will literally just fall on top of the stick. If you use more of the tip of your pinky, you're going to find more success that way. Don't let your pinky grab over like that. We don't want that to happen. Keep the pinky on top. Finally, the thumb on the other side is going to go on the stick, kind of similar to what your pinky is doing. I like to wedge my thumb in between the grip and this little bump on the frog. If I wedge it in between there, I know it's not going to roll about because my fingers get sweaty or anything like that. When all my fingers are in place, they should be about equidistant from each other, and it should almost look like I'm leaning forward. See how I'm kind of leaning forward, almost like I'm pouring a cup of water. That's kind of what your bow grip should look like. It's not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel normal. It takes some practice, it takes some work to make sure that you get comfortable with that. Think very weighted, think very down with your bow grip. Try not to let everything go up here. And always keep your fingers naturally curved. We don't want them to be straight. So that's the bow grip. It's going to take a little while to get used to that. Thankfully, the violin viola hold is much, much simpler. We've got our shoulder rest on properly. Basically, we're going to guide the shape of the shoulder rest to the shape of our body. It's going to go up on our left shoulder like this, and we're just going to nizzle our chin. It's more of our jaw really, but we're going to nizzle it more on this chin rest so it's nice and comfortable. You want to try to position it in a way where your shoulder doesn't come up to meet it and your neck doesn't bend too much to get to it either. You want to try to keep your body as natural as possible so the instrument just kind of falls there how it wants to. Now there's some debate on whether the instrument should be over here or whether it should be over here. The basic guideline is you want to try to follow a 45-degree angle from your body. If this is 90, you're trying to follow it kind of right around here. Some people like it a little bit more in front, some people like it more a little bit to the left. See what you like. I personally prefer it just a little bit more in front. That way I can see it a lot more naturally without having to twist my neck so much. So now here's the hard part. Holding up the instrument with no hands. If your shoulder rest is on there, if your chin and your jaw's in the right spot, you should be able to hold it up with no hands, which frees up your hands to find your bow grip. Always make sure that when we're playing with a straight back. We're playing with our neck straight up and down. We want to have a natural body frame, natural body position, and our feet are always going to be flat on the ground. Once all that is in position, we're ready to play. So we finished playing, and now we gotta put everything away. There are a couple of key things you need to remember when you are putting it away. First thing you're gonna do, you should always have a cloth in your case because rosin can get dusty. Rosin can get a little bit messy. You can even kind of see with the lighting that I have some rosin on my string right now. If it stays on there too long, the rosin can literally grip, can really, adhere to the strings. It can even adhere to the body of the instrument, and it'll make the strings a little harder to play, and it'll just make the instrument kind of look dirty and drab and not very pleasant. So what you're just going to do is you're going to take a cloth, you're going to wipe off the strings, you're going to wipe off the body of the instrument, and then you're literally going to wedge it in between the strings and the fingerboard so that you can wipe off the fingerboard as well. So I've wiped off the instrument. It's looking nice and clean, kind of like it was before we played. I'm going to take off my shoulder rest. It's very easy. Just slide it off so that it wants to slide off. Make sure that when you put your shoulder rest away, if your case has room for a shoulder rest, you can just slide it in right there. If your case doesn't have room for a shoulder rest, don't try to get creative and put it on the instrument or next to it or something like that. Just put it in a book bag, or if it's got a pocket on the top, you can put it in there. But don't try to force the shoulder rest into your case. You don't want negative things to happen to your violin. Once you put the violin in the case, if it's got a neck strap, definitely strap it in. You don't want it to be bumping around on the inside of your case. If your case has a cover or a cloth, definitely want to drape that on top of it. When you put your bow in the case, definitely make sure that you have loosened it first of all. It's very important. If you keep it tight for too long, then the hairs in the stick can start to what's called warp, and you don't want that. When you put the stick away, put it in like this. You want it to be hanging on the stick. You don't want to put it like this where it's hanging on the hairs. Once again, just a little bit of unnecessary tension that you don't need. So hairs going down, stick going up, and definitely make sure that you've locked it into place because you don't want the hairs or the stick or any part of the bow to accidentally fall out and clunk on top of the violin. So definitely make sure you put it in like that. And then you can just shut the case with the violin in it only. You want to make sure that you don't put your books, you don't put your accessories or anything inside there. If there's a pocket for it, you can put it in there, but we only want a cloth covering the instrument. We don't want anything else on top of it. So you might encounter a situation where you need to leave your instrument, whether it's going to the bathroom or get a snack or go up to the board or something like that. If it is at all possible, please put it back in your case. If you accidentally just leave it on the chair or leave it on the ground, an accident is going to happen eventually. It might not happen to you, it might not happen right now, but I have seen it happen where it gets thrown into the air or it gets dropped on the ground or something like that. So if you have to put it down, try to put it in a secure spot. Definitely don't put it on its bottom. Put it like this on top of your chair, kind of like that if you have to. But the safest place for your instrument is either in your arms or in the case. So we're done playing. Now I'm going to show you all the things that you should probably have as a violin player or a viola player. One of the most must-have tools, as I was mentioning earlier, is rosin. Without rosin, you're going to find it very difficult to play because you might put your bow across the string and you'll get no sound or just a little bit of sound. So everybody needs to have themselves some kind of rosin in their case. Because we don't want the strings or the body to get too caked with rosin, everybody needs a cloth. It doesn't really matter what kind of cloth you have in your case, as long as it's some kind of dust absorbent cloth, because that will really help take all the rosin off the strings. Or if dust happens to get on top of it, it'll take that off as well. So everybody should have a cloth in their case. It's usually a good idea to have a backup pair of strings, because while most likely your strings are going to be completely fine for the duration of their life, something bad could happen where a string snaps or it gets frayed or damaged in some way, and we want to be able to replace it, because it's very annoying to play on like a 2-string or a 3-stringed instrument. So having a backup pair of strings is definitely highly recommended. You might find some parts in your music require a mute. Mutes are very cheap, and they're easy to install on the instrument. They just give it a slightly different color, slightly different sound. So you can definitely get yourself some mutes. They're easy enough. If you're having trouble holding your bow, like just the things aren't really making sense and it's not very natural, you can get yourself some bow buddies. Bow buddies are very helpful with kind of guiding the fingers where they're supposed to go. Most people will want a shoulder rest. Shoulder rests are very handy because a lot of people have long necks and the violin just doesn't really fit there properly, so the shoulder rest will put it in a place where we can comfortably play it. This is an Everest shoulder rest. They come in some fancy colors if that's what floats your boat, but there's lots of different types of shoulder rests out there for different body shapes and for different heights and different specialities. And then lastly, most people are going to want to get themselves a tuner. You can get one of these little snark clip-on tuners, very handy. You can just kind of clip it on there. It'll show you immediately if you're in tune or not, and they work with other instruments too. But of course, you can also get little devices that have metronomes or drones. You can get things on your phone, but tuners are definitely a must. Well, those are all the things you should know to get yourself ready to go, ready to play, ready to practice. I hope you guys keep on playing your songs.
Thanks for watching today. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@kbimusicshop.com or call us at 540-891-7800. Our staff would love to help you out. Also, check out our website. It's www.kbimusicshop.com for a PDF of this video's information and for all your musical needs. Let us help you play your song.